Josh Martin, NBA lead writer for Bleacher Report. Josh, thanks for the time. Let me start here. For some reason, I've not the 4-5 matchups in these opening round playoffs. I just have no interest in whatsoever because I feel like neither team is going to make it past the second round. Am I crazy? Am I missing something?
I don't know that you're entirely crazy. I mean, certainly in the Eastern Conference, I wouldn't expect Washington or Toronto, but in this case, Washington, most likely to get past the Atlanta Hawks in the second round, though. You never know. The playoffs are a totally different beast, and Washington with Wall and Beal playing well, and with the bigs that they have, and Paul Pierce available, did outside shots, could steal a couple games from the Hawks at the very least. The Grizzlies, though, they might have a shot against the Golden State Warriors in a playoff series if they're able to slow down the pace, play the way the Grizzlies like to play, really grind it out, play inside-out basketball, play tough and physical. The Warriors can play that way as well, but certainly Golden State isn't at its peak unless the Warriors are getting up and down the floor and getting easy shots in transition.
You talk about that Golden State team, and we talked about it to start our show today, and I made mention of I made the mistake of watching 95% of that game and then deciding that when there was 5 minutes left and the Warriors were down by 20 that the game was pretty much over, and decided to watch something else instead. I know. I've learned.
Classic mistake.
I know it. I know. I learned my lesson. I said I don't care how terrible. I don't care how terrible tomorrow's game is. I'm not changing the channel from the Pelicans Warriors game. But Steph Curry has just been remarkable all season long and during this series. How do they make it work so well? And how do you have a team that's down by 20 and with that little time left, and they stay so calm and collected and manage to pull out a win?
Because these guys have been through battles before. There's so much talk about, well, the Warriors, they don't have championship experience, so they're not going to be able to survive the playoffs. It's like that kind of ignores, number one, that these guys had been to the playoffs the previous 2 years and won a series 2 years ago and probably would have won a series last year if not for Andrew Bogut being out. And number two, this group has been through a lot more prior to that. There was all the tumult in the Golden State organization prior to this recent 3-year run of playoffs where these guys learn, how bad things can be when they were, tanking to keep their pick in 2012, and they were terrible before that, and Steph Curry had all these ankle problems, and so did Andrew Bogut. Like, these guys have been through the fire, and now they're here. Like, they should be ready for this moment, and they've proven themselves to be ready so far.
How good is Anthony Davis going to be once the Pelicans get a little help for him somewhere? How good is this guy going to be in the future?
Well, let's think about how good he is right now.
Yeah.
At the tender age of 22 years old, he's already been fantastic in this playoff series, averaging 30 points, 10.7 rebounds, 3 blocks. He's been just as beastly as ever in this postseason series, and you figure, down the line, what is he going to add to himself and to his game? He could get still a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Maybe he stretches his range out to three-point territory. That could make him practically unguardable on the offensive end, especially if he's also able to add in something of a post game. Because right now, so much of his scoring is about taking 1 or 2 dribbles and pulling up, or getting a shot off an alley-oop, or just basically working off his other teammates. Imagine if he could then become sort of a singular one-on-one force. I think that would really take his game to the next level and make him far and away the best player in basketball.
Fort and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville, 105.3 online, ESPNEvansville.com. Josh Martin from Bleacher Report joining us on the Menard Studio Hotline. You look at these first-round playoff matchups, and you've got everybody but the Clippers-Spurs, which, I mean, that's a tied-up 1-1 right now. They'll get ready for Game 3 later on tonight. But the Boston-Cleveland matchup, the Bulls-Bucks matchup, and the Warriors and Pelicans all at 3 games to none. Are those all three? Are those all 3 sweeps in your mind, or can Boston, the Pelicans, and the Bucks still steal 1 or 2 here and make something of these series?
I mean, I suppose they can all steal a game because these games have been very close. It's not like the Bulls and the Cavs and the Warriors have been blowing out their opponents in these games. they've pretty much all been by single digits, the margins, if I'm not mistaken. And, two of those games last night went to overtime. Bulls and Bucks went to double overtime. So you figure if things are that close, if something breaks one way instead of another way, then surely Milwaukee or New Orleans or Boston might have won a game already. So they'll be desperate, certainly in Game 4, to try to stave off being swept. So I would hope and probably expect at least one of those underdogs between Milwaukee, Boston, and New Orleans to pull out at least one win at home before these things are done.
Well, Derrick Rose comes back off of his latest knee surgery there to clean that up a little bit. In the playoffs, he's played very well. He had 34 last night. Jimmy Butler, we knew, was playing well before he went down for a few games, put up 24 last night. This Bulls team with a healthy Derrick Rose, are they a contender?
Absolutely. It totally changes the look of this team when you don't have to rely on guys like Pau Gasol and Jimmy Butler and Joakim Noah, who are very good offensive players. You don't have to rely on them to be the guy. You have the guy. Everybody's paying attention to the guy, that guy being Derrick Rose. That makes everybody else's life easier. The question still for the Bulls is how do they get it done defensively? They weren't nearly as dominant this season defensively as they had been in years past under Tom Thibodeau. Part of that is the result of injuries. A lot of guys were banged up, Joakim Noah in particular, but also Jimmy Butler and Taj Gibson, just a bunch of time in addition to Derrick Rose, of course. But for them, it's kind of an awkward fit with the Bulls because they basically start two centers in Gasol and Noah, which necessarily means that one of those two guys is going to have to play farther from the basket than he's used to, especially in what we assume will be a second-round series against Cleveland, where the Cavs have a guy in Kevin Love whose three-point shooting forces other bigs to come away from the basket and puts them in uncomfortable spots.
You talk about Cleveland, and let's mention Kevin Love there because, again, what's going on over the course of the season, it's been up and down for him. I think there's, he and LeBron maybe aren't best friends, which is fine, whatever, as long as they're getting it done on the court. Has a good game last night, but regardless of what happens with the Cavaliers this year, if they win the whole thing, is Kevin Love gone or is he sticking around? How do you see that playing out?
He's said to date, and take it however you will, that he's going to opt into the final year of his contract. We'll see what happens when the summer comes, but certainly financially that makes a lot of sense unless he's going to opt out and then maybe he's signed a one-year deal with Cleveland or with whomever to then prepare himself for the free agency summer of 2016 when the cap is expected to jump to $89 million, or maybe he signs a two-year deal and prepares himself for 2017 when the cap is expected to jump up to $108 million. So I think he's got a lot of options on his table. Any scenario that pops up, whether it's an early exit for Cleveland or a finals appearance or a title, whatever, you could imagine him going either way. But right now, I would tend to think that he's going to stick around in Cleveland just because, he's never gotten a taste of this kind of playoff basketball before. He's going to want more of that rather than going to a place like New York or L.A., where that's going to be far from guaranteed in his first year in either of those spots.
Well, and that's what it feels like to me. It seems like if the goal is for every guy that walks into the NBA to win a championship, for him, why would you want to leave Cleveland? I know he came from the Timberwolves where he was the man and everything went through him, and now maybe it's been a bit of an adjustment trying to share the ball, so to speak, with guys like LeBron James and Kyrie Irving and the others that are on J.R. Smith and those kind of guys. Although maybe if he gets a win in Cleveland, maybe he feels he can go out somewhere else and be a part of another rebuilding kind of team. I don't know what the situation is going to play out. But the Boston Celtics, I don't know if there's maybe a little bit more vested interest in this part of the country because, we sit here in Indiana and we know the history of Brad Stevens just up the road from us there in Indianapolis at Butler. Yeah. But what they've been able to do in this series, I don't expect them to win it, and I would suspect that Cleveland is probably going to sweep this series. I don't think Boston will get a win here. But this is a team that it feels to me are just one or two players away from being a team that can be a contender in the East. Am I off base there?
I don't think you are at all. It's clearly the infrastructure is there for this team to be competitive. They're going to have to get better defensively, certainly. They were not a good defensive team during the regular season, and they've only been able to defend the Cavaliers well in fits and spurts. But considering that the offensive juggernaut that Cleveland morphed into over the second half of the season, you have to take your hat off to what the Celtics have been able to do to fluster the Cavaliers to some extent. And look, if you do get better talent in there, if you're Boston, you get some good players into Brad Stevens' system, you get them to play hard, you get them to play together, then you got to think that this team is going to have a really good shot to turn things around quickly. And Danny Ainge will have plenty of those necessary tools for that turnaround at his disposal this summer. You know, the Celtics are going to have a bunch of cap space. They're going to have several first-round picks and a bunch of second-round picks they can use to deal for someone. I don't necessarily expect to see a repeat of 2007 where the Celtics wind up with Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett to pair with Paul Pierce, but I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if Danny Ainge pulled something out of his hat and the Celtics wind up with another star or two to build around.
NBA lead writer from Bleacher Report, Josh Martin, joining us on the Menard Studio Hotline. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. I want to talk about Rajon Rondo for just a minute. The way he played the other night, I was very critical of him, as many were, very childish in the way he played. And just it's been kind of his M.O. Since he's been in the league. It looks like his time in Dallas is all said and done as it should be. I don't know if this back issue is a legit thing or if that's just something they made up to try to keep him off the floor. I don't know. But I understand he's extremely talented, but I think sometimes he's too smart for his own good. Somebody like a Knicks or a Lakers will take a chance on him, I believe. But is it just a matter of he might be happy for a little bit, but will we just see this happen again regardless of where he goes?
I really don't know. I don't think anybody really knows or can really get inside of Rondo's head and figure out what he wants. You know, there are reports out there that prior to the trade to Dallas that he had his sights set on signing with the Lakers. So maybe if he comes to L.A. and he signs with the Lakers and he's with his, fellow you-know-what, Kobe Bryant, and they're on the team together, maybe that will help him turn things around. But it's just, I don't know who's going to really take that chance, at least at a really high number on him, considering that, he, for one, is not the player he used to be. Has not been the same guy since that torn ACL. That's clear. His confidence isn't quite there. He's still not a very good shooter. Now he can't get inside quite as easily because he's not the same athlete that he was. And when you look around the league, there's so many point guards out there, so many quality point guards, a number of them who will be available on the market this summer, chief among them Goran Dragic, who you have to figure the Lakers and Knicks will go hard after as well. So Rondo's not even going to be the top option on the market. So I guess they'll just have to find his happiness wherever it is that he winds up.
Well, the Clippers-Spurs series, we'll flip over to that a little bit. The most intriguing one so far, and we kind of knew that going in. The Clippers and Spurs both match up very well together. L.A. is one of the few teams that can kind of spread out defensively against the Spurs. Tony Parker's health in question. He's questionable in tonight's game. That's going to play into the series. Kind of a double question. How do you see the series playing out? And how long do these Spurs stay together? They're getting old, man.
Well, to your first question, it's really hard to predict how the series goes if we don't really know what Tony Parker's situation is, how healthy he is. Because, Patty Mills was able to step in, score 18 points in Parker's place in Game 2, but how often are they going to get that sort of play out of Patty? There are enough guys on the Spurs roster who can kind of do their own part to cover up for Tony if he's not the same guy, but if they're trying to go up against a Clippers team with Chris Paul at point guard, that's not going to be easy at all for San Antonio to make up for Parker's absence, to say the least. So I think the series really hinges on that situation. And as far as the longevity of the Spurs, that really comes down to what Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili both decide to do this summer. There's been talk all season that this would be their final rodeo, so to speak, and they'll both be free agents after this season. And I guess it would make a lot of sense for them to retire at the same time. And you wonder if those guys go, what does Greg Popovich decide to do? He might want to retire, but at the same time, a team built around Kawhi Leonard and Tony Parker and maybe another big free agent signing this summer, could leave Pop with it just as good of a chance of competing for a championship as ever.
Josh Martin, NBA lead writer from Bleacher Report, joining us on Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. All right, one last one for you, Josh, and then we'll let you go. Who's your two teams in the finals, and who wins the whole thing?
I still have Cleveland and Golden State in the finals, and I picked Golden State to win it all at the outset, and I haven't really seen anything yet to sway me from that decision.
All right. Appreciate the time, Josh. Thanks so much. You can follow Josh on Twitter at JoshMartinNBA. Hopefully we can do it again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.